Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial on configuring VLANs on Cisco switches. VLANs, or Virtual Local Area Networks, are a powerful tool for segmenting network traffic and improving security and performance. In this tutorial, we will cover the basic concepts of VLANs and show you how to configure them on Cisco switch. Before we dive into the configuration, let's start with the basics of VLANs. A VLAN is a logical grouping of network devices based on characteristics such as department, location, or function. VLANs allow you to segment network traffic and improve security by restricting access between VLANs. In a traditional LAN, all devices on the network are in the same broadcast domain. This means that when a device broadcasts a message, every device on the network receives it, regardless of whether it needs it or not. With VLANs, you can divide the network into multiple broadcast domains, so that devices only receive the traffic that is relevant to them. Now that we understand the basics of VLANs, let's move on to the configuration. We will be configuring VLANs on a Cisco Catalyst 2960 switch, but the process should be similar on other Cisco switches. Run the Show VLAN brief before you begin. This will display a summary of the VLAN configuration on the switch, including the VLAN IDs, names, and ports assigned to each VLAN. On our switch, there is only the default VLAN, which is VLAN 1, and all ports are on this VLAN. To create a VLAN, we need to enter configuration mode on the switch. Once we are in configuration mode, we can create VLANs. For example, to create VLAN 2, we would enter the following. Repeat this command for each VLAN that you want to create. You can also name the VLAN you create if you want to. Now that we have created the VLANs, we need to assign ports to them. This will determine which devices are in each VLAN. To assign a port to a VLAN, we use the following command. Here I want to assign the VLAN to a number of ports, so I will use the interface range command. The switch port mode access command on a Cisco switch is used to configure an Ethernet interface as an access port. An access port is a type of port that is used to connect an end device, such as a computer, printer, or server, to a switch. When a switch port is configured as an access port, it only carries traffic for a single VLAN. Any traffic that is received on the port is automatically tagged with the VLAN ID configured on the port, and any traffic that is transmitted from the port is also tagged with the same VLAN ID. Let us verify that our VLAN configuration is working correctly by running the Show VLAN brief command. As you can see, ports 1 to 5 are now in VLAN 2. A port on a Cisco switch can run two VLANs, a data VLAN and a voice VLAN, to support both data and voice traffic like that for an IP phone on your office desk on the same physical port. Voice traffic has specific quality of service (QoS) requirements, such as low latency and jitter, and is typically given a higher priority than data traffic. By configuring a voice VLAN, the switch can automatically assign voice traffic to a separate VLAN with higher quality of service priority, while data traffic remains in its own separate VLAN. To configure a voice VLAN on a Cisco switch, you can follow these steps. First, you need to create the voice VLAN on a switch using the VLAN command, just like you would create any other VLAN. Next, you need to configure the port for both the data and voice VLANs. I've already created a data VLAN for port 2. As you can see, port 2 is in both the accounting VLAN, which is the data VLAN, and VLAN 3, which is the voice VLAN. On a Cisco switch, a trunk port is a type of port that can carry traffic from multiple VLANs simultaneously. Trunk ports are typically used to interconnect switches or to connect a switch to a router or other network device that supports VLAN tagging. When a port is configured as a trunk port, all traffic that is transmitted or received on that port is tagged with a VLAN ID. This allows multiple VLANs to be carried over the same physical link and also enables the receiving device to differentiate between traffic belonging to different VLANs. The show interface switch port command on a Cisco switch is used to display the current configuration and operational status of a switch port. The output of this command includes the following information. Administrative mode. This displays the current administrative mode of the port, which can be either access mode or trunk mode. Currently, it is showing dynamic auto. On a Cisco switch, the dynamic auto mode is one of the options for configuring a switch port as a trunk port. When a port is configured as dynamic auto, it will attempt to negotiate trunking with the remote switch if it detects that the remote port is configured as dynamic desirable or trunk mode. If a remote port is configured as trunk mode, the local port will successfully form a trunk. However, if the remote port is configured as dynamic auto or access mode, the local port will operate as an access port and not form a trunk. In other words, if a remote port is not configured for trunking, the local port will not form a trunk. Instead, it will operate as an access port and accept traffic only for the configured VLAN. Operational mode. This displays the current operational mode of the port, which can be either access mode or trunk mode. Trunking native mode VLAN. This displays the VLAN ID assigned as the native VLAN for the trunk port. Trunking VLANs enabled. This displays the list of VLAN IDs allowed to be transmitted on the trunk port. Overall, the show interface switch port command provides a useful overview of a configuration and status of a switch port, including information about VLAN assignments and trunking settings. This information can be helpful for troubleshooting network issues and verifying proper VLAN configuration. On a Cisco switch, the switch port mode command is used to set the operational mode of a switch port. This command is used to configure the port as either an access port or a trunk port. The options for the switch port mode command are access. This option sets the port to operate in access mode, which means that it can only carry traffic for a single VLAN. Trunk. This option sets the port to operate in trunk mode, which means that it can carry traffic for multiple VLANs. Trunk ports use VLAN tagging to distinguish between different VLANs. Dynamic Auto. This option is the default on most Cisco switches. It sets the port to operate in dynamic auto mode, which means that it can negotiate trunking with the remote switch if the remote switch port is configured as dynamic desirable or trunk mode. Dynamic Desirable. This option sets the port to operate in dynamic desirable mode, which means that it actively tries to negotiate trunking with the remote switch. The trunk link is now enabled. It was not enabled before because the default on Cisco switches is dynamic auto, so both ports were in that mode. On a Cisco switch, the show interface trunk command is used to display information about the trunk ports configured on switch. This command provides detailed information about the trunking state and configuration of the interface. To create a VLAN quickly, you can use this method. On a Cisco switch, the switch port trunk allow command is used to specify which VLANs are allowed to pass over a trunk port. This command is used to configure VLAN pruning, which is the process of removing VLANs from a trunk port that are not required to be forwarded on the trunk. On a Cisco switch, the switch port trunk native command is used to specify the VLAN ID for untagged traffic on a trunk port. This command is used to configure the native VLAN, which is the VLAN that is used for untagged traffic on a trunk port. It's important to note that the native VLAN should be configured to match on both ends of the trunk link. Otherwise, issues may occur with untagged traffic. Additionally, it's recommended to avoid using VLAN 1 as the native VLAN, as it's often used for management traffic and can be a security risk. That's it for this tutorial on configuring VLANs on Cisco switches. In the next video, we are going to look at how to configure routing between VLANs. We hope you found it useful and that you now have a better understanding of VLANs and how to configure them. Remember, VLANs are a powerful tool for segmenting network traffic and improving security and performance, so be sure to use them wisely in your network. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.